The snow came down so thick that Deanna Sutherland could barely see her own hands clutching the reins of her father's horse, and the bullet wound in her side burned like hellfire, despite the freezing cold that numbed everything else. Her father had done this to her, put a bullet through her flesh during their argument about selling the ranch, and then he had ridden off into the white madness of the blizzard, leaving her to die alone in the mountains above Angel's Camp, California, in the winter of 1878. She had tried to ride back down the mountain trail herself, but the blood loss made her dizzy, and when she finally tumbled from the saddle into a snowdrift, she wondered if anyone would find her body before spring came. The wind howled through the pines, and Deanna pressed her hand harder against the wound, feeling the warm stickiness of blood seeping through her coat. She had always known her father was a hard man, cruel even, but she never imagined he would shoot his own daughter. The argument had escalated so quickly, his rage at her refusal to sign over her mother's share of the ranch erupting into violence. He had pulled his pistol, fired, and rode away without looking back. The shock of his betrayal hurt worse than the bullet itself. Deanna tried to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her. The cold was taking hold now, creeping into her bones despite her layers of wool and leather. She could hear her horse somewhere nearby, whinnying nervously, but she could not reach the animal. The snow kept falling, covering her tracks, covering everything. She thought about her mother, who had died 5 years ago, and wondered if she would see her soon. The world was growing dimmer, the pain fading into a strange numbness. Then she heard hoofbeats, slow and steady, cutting through the storm. Deanna tried to call out, but her voice came as barely a whisper. She managed to lift her head slightly, squinting through the curtain of snow. A dark shape materialized, a rider on a large bay horse moving carefully through the drifts. The figure drew closer, and she could make out the broad shoulders of a man in a heavy coat, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the wind. "Help," she managed to croak, louder this time. The rider's head snapped in her direction, and suddenly he was dismounting, wading through the knee-deep snow toward her. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, turning her gently, and she found herself looking up into a face weathered by sun and wind, with piercing gray eyes that widened with alarm. "Jesus," the man breathed. "You are shot." Isaac Campbell had been riding back from checking his trap lines when he stumbled upon the woman in the snow. He had almost missed her entirely, her dark coat blending with the shadows of the pines, but his horse had caught her scent and alerted him. Now, as he pulled back her coat to examine the wound, his jaw tightened. The bullet had passed through her side, but she was bleeding badly, and the cold had her lips turning blue. "My father," Deanna whispered, her teeth chattering. "He shot me, left me." Isaac felt a surge of fury at those words, but he pushed it down. There would be time for anger later. Right now, he needed to get her to Dr. Harrison in Angel's Camp, and that meant riding hard through a blizzard that was only getting worse. He shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around her, then pulled off his bandana and pressed it against the wound. "Hold this tight," he instructed. "I am taking you to the doctor, but you need to stay awake. Can you do that for me?" Deanna nodded weakly, her hand covering his as he pressed the bandana to her side. Isaac scooped her up as gently as he could, and she gasped at the movement, fresh blood seeping through the makeshift bandage. He carried her to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Tucker, and lifted her into the saddle before mounting behind her. He pulled her back against his chest, keeping one arm wrapped around her waist to hold her steady while his other hand gripped the reins. "What is your name?" he asked, urging Tucker forward into the storm. "Deanna," she managed. "Deanna Sutherland." "I am Isaac Campbell. Hold on tight, Deanna. We have got a long ride ahead." The wind screamed around them as Isaac guided Tucker down the mountain trail. The snow was coming down so hard he could barely see 5 feet ahead, but he knew these mountains well. He had been trapping and hunting in them for 6 years, ever since he had come to California from Montana. He kept Deanna pressed against him, sharing his warmth, feeling her shiver violently despite the layers of clothing. "Talk to me," he said, his mouth close to her ear so she could hear him over the wind. "Tell me about your ranch." "It was my mother's," Deanna said, her voice thin. "She inherited it from her father, 200 acres in the valley. My father married her for it, I think. He never loved her, never loved me either." Isaac felt her sag against him and he tightened his grip. "Stay with me, Deanna. Keep talking. I am so cold. I know we will get you warm soon." "Tell me more about your mother." Deanna forced herself to focus on his voice, on the warmth of his chest against her back. "She was beautiful, kind. She taught me to read, to ride. She died of pneumonia 5 years ago, and after that, my father became even meaner. He wanted to sell the ranch, but in her will, she left half of it to me. He cannot sell without my signature. So he tried to kill you for it," Isaac said grimly. "Yes." The trail grew steeper as they descended, and Tucker picked his way carefully through the deep snow. Isaac could feel Deanna growing weaker, her body becoming heavier against him. He talked to her constantly, asking her questions, making her respond, anything to keep her conscious. He told her about his own life, about growing up in Montana, about losing his family to scarlet fever when he was 19 and heading west to start over. "I have a small cabin near Angel's Camp," he said. "I trap and hunt, sell the furs in town. It is a simple life, but it is mine." "Sounds peaceful," Deanna murmured. "It can be lonely sometimes." "I know about lonely." They rode for what felt like hours, the storm raging around them. Isaac's face was numb with cold, his hands aching, but he did not slow. Deanna had stopped shivering, which worried him more than anything. He knew that was a bad sign, that it meant her body was giving up the fight against the cold. He urged Tucker faster, taking risks on the icy trail that he normally would not take. "Deanna," he said sharply. "Deanna, wake up." Her head lolled against his shoulder. He shifted the reins to one hand and patted her cheek with the other. "Deanna, you need to stay awake. Talk to me." "Tired," she whispered. "I know, but you cannot sleep yet. Tell me about the ranch. What does it look like?" "Green," she said after a moment. "In the spring it is so green. The grass grows high and we have a creek that runs right through the property. Oak trees. My mother planted roses by the house. It sounds beautiful. You will see it again, I promise you. Just stay with me." The lights of Angel's Camp finally appeared through the snow, golden squares of warmth in the white darkness. Isaac felt a surge of relief as he guided Tucker down the main street, past the darkened storefronts and saloons that were still lit, despite the late hour. Dr. Harrison's house was at the far end of town, a 2-story building with a lamp burning in the window. Isaac dismounted and pulled Deanna down into his arms. She was barely conscious now, her breathing shallow. He kicked at the door with his boot, not caring about propriety. "Dr. Harrison." "I need help." The door opened almost immediately, revealing a gray-haired man in his shirt sleeves, spectacles perched on his nose. Dr. Harrison took one look at Deanna and stepped aside. "Bring her in. Upstairs, first room on the left." Isaac carried her up the narrow staircase to a small examination room. A fire burned in the hearth, and the warmth was almost painful after hours in the cold. He laid Deanna on the table as gently as he could, and the doctor immediately began cutting away her coat and shirt to expose the wound. "Gunshot," Dr. Harrison said, his voice calm and professional. "Exit wound in the back. That is good. How long ago?" "I do not know exactly. I found her in the mountains maybe 3 hours ago." She has lost a lot of blood. You got her here just in time." The doctor looked at Isaac. "You can wait downstairs. This will take a while." Isaac hesitated, looking down at Deanna's pale face. Her eyes were closed, and for a terrible moment he thought she had stopped breathing, but then he saw the faint rise and fall of her chest. He reached out and brushed a strand of dark hair from her forehead, surprised by the tenderness of the gesture. "She said her father shot her," he told the doctor, "then left her to die in the blizzard." Dr. Harrison's expression darkened. "Robert Sutherland, I should have known. That man is poison." He began cleaning the wound with swift, efficient movements. "Go on now, let me work." Isaac went downstairs to the small sitting room and sank into a chair by the fire. His whole body ached from the cold and tension. He pulled off his gloves and held his hands out to the flames, trying to restore feeling to his fingers. Tucker was in the doctor's small stable out back, fed and brushed down by the doctor's assistant. The storm still raged outside, snow piling against the windows. He could not stop thinking about Deanna, about the feel of her in his arms, the trust in her eyes when she looked at him. He had never met her before today, but something had shifted inside him when he found her in the snow. He had felt a fierce protectiveness rise up in his chest, a determination to save her at any cost. Now, sitting in the warm room, he realized he was terrified that she might not make it. Hours passed. Isaac dozed in the chair, jerking awake at every sound. Finally, as dawn light began to filter through the curtains, Dr. Harrison came down the stairs. His sleeves were rolled up and there was blood on his shirt, but his expression was satisfied. "She will live," he said simply. Isaac felt his whole body sag with relief. "Thank God." The bullet went clean through, missed anything vital. She was lucky. Another hour in that cold and she would have been gone. Dr. Harrison poured himself a whiskey from a bottle on the sideboard. "She is sleeping now. The wound is cleaned and stitched, and I have given her something for the pain. She will need to stay here for at least a week, maybe 2, while she heals." "Can I see her?" The doctor studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Just for a minute. She needs rest." Isaac climbed the stairs and pushed open the door to the examination room. Deanna had been moved to a proper bed, covered with clean white sheets and a thick quilt. Her face was still pale, but her breathing was deeper now, more regular. He walked to her bedside and stood looking down at her, this woman he had known for only a few hours but who had somehow become important to him. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with effort. "You saved my life," she whispered. "You would have done the same for me," he said, pulling a chair close to the bed. "I do not know if I would have been brave enough to ride through that storm. You are plenty brave. You survived a bullet and a blizzard." A faint smile touched her lips. "Will you come back to visit?" "I will come back every day until you are well enough to leave, I promise." "Why?" she asked. "You do not even know me." Isaac reached out and took her hand, her fingers small and cold in his. "I would like to know you if you will let me." Something shifted in her eyes, a warmth that had nothing to do with fever. "I would like that too." Over the following days, Isaac became a fixture at Dr. Harrison's house. He came every morning after checking his trap lines, carrying firewood or supplies, and he would sit with Deanna for hours. At first she was weak and slept often, but as her strength returned, they talked more. She told him about growing up on the ranch, about the loneliness of living with a father who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to his greed. He told her about his own losses, about the family he had buried in Montana, about the years of drifting before he settled in Angel's Camp. "Do you ever think about going back?" Deanna asked one afternoon. She was sitting up in bed now, wearing a nightgown borrowed from the doctor's wife, her dark hair braided over one shoulder. "To Montana? No, there is nothing left for me there but graves." Isaac sat in his usual chair by her bedside, a cup of coffee warming his hands. "This is my home now. Do you like it here?" "I do. The mountains are beautiful, the people are decent for the most part. I have made a life here." Deanna looked down at her hands. "I do not know if I can go back to the ranch, not with him there. Your father cannot hurt you anymore. You are of age, you own half that property. You could have him removed if you wanted." "Could I?" She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "I thought about that, but I was not sure if the law would side with me. He is my father, after all." "The law does not give a man the right to shoot his own daughter. Dr. Harrison has documented your wound, and you have me as a witness to your testimony. We could go to the sheriff once you are well." Deanna was quiet for a long moment. "I am afraid of him," she admitted. "I've been afraid of him my whole life." Isaac reached out and took her hand, and it felt natural now, this physical connection between them. "You do not have to be afraid anymore. I will not let him hurt you again." She squeezed his fingers. "You barely know me. Why would you do this?" "Because it is the right thing to do." He paused, then added more quietly, "and because I care about what happens to you." Color rose in her cheeks, and she did not look away. "I care about what happens to you too." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Isaac wanted to lean forward and kiss her, but he held back. She was still healing, still vulnerable. There would be time for that later if she wanted it. Instead, he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Get some rest," he said softly. "I will be back tomorrow." As Deanna healed, Isaac found himself thinking about her constantly. When he was running his trap lines in the mountains, he thought about the way she laughed at his stories. When he was skinning pelts in his cabin, he thought about the intelligence in her eyes, the way she asked questions about his life and actually listened to the answers. When he lay in bed at night, he thought about the curve of her neck, the softness of her hand in his. He had been with women before, brief encounters in saloons or with the few available ladies in town, but this was different. This felt like something real, something lasting. The idea both thrilled and terrified him. He had spent 6 years avoiding attachments, not wanting to risk the pain of loss again. But Deanna had worked her way past his defenses without even trying. 2 weeks after he brought her to the doctor, Deanna was declared well enough to leave. The wound was healing cleanly, and though she was still weak, Dr. Harrison said she could recover just as well somewhere more comfortable. The problem was where she should go. "She cannot go back to her father," the doctor said, standing in his study with Isaac. "Robert Sutherland has been asking around town about her, playing the concerned father, but everyone knows what kind of man he is." "She could stay with someone in town," Isaac suggested. "Mrs. Patterson runs that boarding house on 3rd Street. Mrs. Patterson is Robert's cousin. She would send word to him immediately." Dr. Harrison fixed Isaac with a knowing look. "You have a cabin, do you not?" Isaac felt his face grow warm. "I do, but it would not be proper." Diana's reputation will suffer more if she is seen as the daughter who ran away from her father. But if she is staying with the man who saved her life while she recovers, well, that is a different story. Especially if you two were to make things official. "Official," Isaac repeated. "You care about her. Anyone can see that. And unless I am very much mistaken, she cares about you too." Isaac could not deny it. "I have known her for 2 weeks. My wife and I knew each other for 3 days before I proposed. We have been married for 32 years. The doctor smiled. "Sometimes you just know. But that is a decision for you and Deanna to make. For now, I am just suggesting a practical solution to keep her safe." When Isaac broached the subject with Deanna that evening, she listened carefully, her face unreadable. "I do not want to impose on you," she said. "You have already done so much." "You would not be imposing. I have a spare room and the cabin is small but comfortable. You would be safe there." He hesitated. "But I understand if you would prefer to make other arrangements." Deanna looked at him, and he saw something vulnerable in her expression. "I do not want to be away from you," she said quietly. "These past 2 weeks, your visits have been the best part of my days. But I also do not want you to feel obligated to take care of me." "I do not feel obligated. I want to do this." Isaac moved closer, taking both her hands in his. "Deanna, I know we have not known each other long, but I feel something for you, something real. I want the chance to see where this could go if you want that too." "I do want that," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I have never felt this way about anyone before. When I am with you, I feel safe. I feel seen. You make me laugh and you listen when I talk and you do not try to control me or diminish me. I never would. I know. That is why I am saying yes. I will come stay with you." Isaac felt his heart swell. He cupped her face in his hands, giving her time to pull away, but she leaned into his touch instead. He kissed her then, gently, mindful of her healing body. Her lips were soft and warm, and when she sighed against his mouth, he felt like he had come home after a long journey. The cabin was exactly as Deanna had imagined it, rustic but cozy, with a stone fireplace and sturdy furniture built by hand. Isaac had prepared the spare room for her, putting fresh linens on the bed and building up the fire to chase away the chill. He showed her around with endearing nervousness, pointing out where he kept the food supplies, the wash basin, the extra blankets. "It is not much," he said, "but it is warm and dry." "It is perfect," Deanna assured him. She was still weak, moving slowly, and he hovered nearby in case she needed support. "Isaac, you do not need to worry so much. I am healing well, I know. I just do not want you to overdo it." She smiled and reached up to touch his cheek. "You are very sweet." He caught her hand and kissed her palm. "And you are very beautiful." They fell into a routine quickly. Isaac would rise before dawn to check his trap lines, and Deanna would wake to find him already gone, a fire built up in the hearth and coffee warming on the stove. She would spend the mornings resting and reading from Isaac's small collection of books, then preparing simple meals when she felt strong enough. He would return in the afternoon, and they would sit by the fire and talk for hours. In the evenings, Isaac taught her to play poker with a worn deck of cards, and she taught him the songs her mother used to sing. Sometimes they would just sit in comfortable silence, Diana mending his clothes while he carved small figures from pieces of wood. The intimacy of these quiet moments felt more profound than anything Diana had experienced before. As the weeks passed and her strength returned, Diana found herself falling deeper in love with Isaac Campbell. She loved the way he moved, economical and sure. She loved his dry sense of humor and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She loved how gentle he was with her, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, but always making it clear that he wanted her. One evening, 6 weeks after the blizzard, they were sitting together on the small sofa in front of the fire. Deanna was tucked against Isaac's side, his arm around her shoulders, and they were watching the flames dance. "I need to deal with my father," Deanna said quietly. "I cannot hide here forever." Isaac's arm tightened around her. "I know, I have been thinking about that too. I want to claim my inheritance. I want the ranch. Then we will make that happen. We will go to the sheriff tomorrow and file charges. Dr. Harrison's report should be enough to prove what your father did." Deanna turned to look up at him. "He will fight me. He will make it ugly. Let him. You have the truth on your side, and you have people who will stand with you." Isaac stroked her hair back from her face. "You have me." "For how long?" The question came out more vulnerable than she intended. "What happens after the legal matters are settled? Will you want me to leave?" Isaac pulled back to look at her properly, his expression serious. "Deanna, I do not want you to leave. Ever. I want you to stay here with me. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to spend my days knowing you will be here when I come home. I want to build a life with you." Her breath caught. "Are you saying—" "I am saying I love you. I think I started loving you that night in the blizzard, when you were so brave and strong even though you were dying. I love your kindness and your intelligence and the way you hum while you cook. I love everything about you." He took a deep breath. "I know I do not have much to offer. I am just a trapper with a small cabin, but if you will have me, I want to marry you." Tears spilled down Deanna's cheeks. "You have everything to offer. You have yourself, and that is all I want. Yes, Isaac. Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, deeper than before, and she responded with equal passion. They had been careful with each other for weeks, but now the restraint broke. His hand slid into her hair, and she pressed closer, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I want you so much," he said roughly, "but I want to do this right. I want you to be my wife first." Deanna felt a rush of love for this honorable man. "Then we should get married soon." He laughed, the sound full of joy. "How soon?" "As soon as possible." The next morning they rode into Angel's camp together. Deanna was nervous about being seen in town, worried about facing her father, but Isaac stayed close to her side, his presence giving her courage. They went first to the sheriff's office, where Sheriff Daniels, a gruff man in his 50s, listened to Deanna's story with a deepening scowl. "Robert Sutherland shot you and left you to die," he repeated, looking at the written statement Dr. Harrison had provided. "That is attempted murder." "Yes, sir," Deanna said. "I want to press charges. You understand this will cause talk. He is your father." "He stopped being my father when he put a bullet in me." Sheriff Daniels nodded slowly. "All right then. I will bring him in for questioning. You will need to testify." "I will." After leaving the sheriff's office, they went to see Reverend Thomas at the small church on the edge of town. The Reverend was a young man, newly arrived from San Francisco, and he listened to their request with a warm smile. "I would be honored to marry you," he said. "When would you like the ceremony?" "As soon as the law allows," Isaac said, his hand finding Deanna's. "The waiting period is 3 days. How about Saturday morning?" Deanna looked at Isaac, saw the love and certainty in his eyes, and nodded. Saturday morning would be perfect. The news spread through Angel's camp like wildfire. Robert Sutherland was arrested on Friday afternoon, dragged from his ranch in handcuffs while he cursed and threatened. Deanna gave her testimony to the sheriff, her voice steady despite her father's venomous glare. The evidence was overwhelming. The doctor's report, the bullet wound, Isaac's testimony about finding her in the snow. Robert Sutherland was bound over for trial, bail denied. On Saturday morning, Deanna married Isaac Campbell in the small church, with Dr. Harrison and his wife standing as witnesses. Deanna wore a simple blue dress borrowed from Mrs. Harrison, and Isaac wore his best shirt and trousers. The ceremony was short, but when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife and Isaac kissed her, Deanna felt complete in a way she never had before. They spent their wedding night in the cabin, and it was everything Deanna had hoped for. Isaac was gentle and patient, taking his time to make sure she felt pleasure as well as he did. Afterward, they lay tangled together in his bed, now their bed, and Deanna felt tears slide down her temples. "Are you all right?" Isaac asked, immediately concerned. "Did I hurt you?" "No," she said, laughing through the tears. "I am just happy, happier than I ever thought I could be." He gathered her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you stay this happy." The legal battle over the ranch took 3 months. Robert Sutherland's trial was brief. He was found guilty of attempted murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison. With him gone, Deanna was able to claim her full inheritance. The ranch was hers, free and clear. She and Isaac stood on the porch of the ranch house one spring afternoon, looking out over the green valley, the oak trees in full leaf, the roses blooming exactly as Deanna's mother had planted them. "We could live here," Deanna said softly. "There is so much more room than the cabin. We could run cattle, maybe horses." Isaac wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Is that what you want?" "I want to build something with you, something that is ours, and I think my mother would be happy to see the ranch filled with life and love again." "Then that is what we will do." They moved to the ranch in late spring. Isaac hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, and Deanna threw herself into making the house a home. She painted the walls, hung curtains, filled the rooms with furniture and warmth. They bought cattle and horses, and Isaac proved to be a natural rancher, his skills as a trapper translating well to managing livestock. At night, they would sit on the porch and watch the sunset over the valley, and Deanna would think about how far she had come from that day in the blizzard. She had been dying, shot and abandoned by her own father, and then Isaac had appeared like a miracle. He had saved her life, yes, but he had also given her something to live for. A year after their wedding, Deanna discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac over dinner, watching his face transform from confusion to wonder to pure joy. "A baby," he said, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are having a baby." "Are you happy?" Deanna asked, though she could already see the answer in his eyes. "I am terrified and thrilled and so happy I can barely breathe." He came around the table and pulled her into his arms. Thank you for giving me this." Their son was born in the spring of 1880, a healthy boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after the reverend who had married them, and Isaac proved to be as devoted a father as he was a husband. Deanna would often find him in the nursery, just watching Thomas sleep, a look of wonder on his face. "I never thought I would have this," he told her one night, the baby asleep in his cradle between their bed and the wall. "A family, a home. I thought I had lost that chance forever." "You gave me a home too," Deanna said, reaching for his hand in the darkness. "When I had nowhere to go, when I had no one, you gave me everything." 3 years later, they had a daughter, and they named her Rose, after the flowers Deanna's mother had planted. Rose had her mother's spirit and her father's steadiness, and she followed her older brother everywhere. The ranch prospered, and Isaac and Deanna became respected members of the community. They hosted barn dances and Sunday dinners, and their home was always full of laughter and warmth. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Deanna up into the mountains, to the place where he had found her in the snow. It was summer now, and the meadow was green and filled with wildflowers. They stood together, looking out over the valley far below. "You ever think about that night?" Deanna asked. "All the time," Isaac said. "I think about how easily I could have missed you, if Tucker had not caught your scent, if I had decided to wait out the storm in my cabin instead of heading home. We would never have met. But we did meet. You found me." She turned to face him, her hands on his chest. "You saved me, and then you loved me, and you gave me a life I never dreamed was possible." "You saved me too," he said seriously. "I was just existing before you, going through the motions. You made me live again. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to wake up every morning grateful." They kissed there in the meadow, the same mountains where their story had begun, watching over them. Below, their children were with Mrs. Harrison, safe and happy. The ranch waited for them, their home, their life together. Deanna thought about the terrified, wounded girl she had been, dying in the snow, and the strong, loved woman she had become. It had all started with a blizzard and a cowboy brave enough to ride through it. Years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Thomas grew tall and serious with a love for the land that matched his father's. Rose was bright and curious, always asking questions, always exploring. The ranch expanded, and Isaac and Deanna hired more hands, built a bigger barn, added onto the house. When Thomas was 15, he asked his father about the scar on his mother's side, a puckered mark he had noticed when she was changing his sister's bandage after a fall. Isaac and Deanna exchanged a look, and then Deanna sat her son down and told him the story. She told him about his grandfather's cruelty, about the bullet and the blizzard, about how Isaac had risked his life to save hers. Thomas listened with wide eyes, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I am glad he is in prison," Thomas said finally. "And I am glad you found each other." "So are we," Isaac said, pulling Deanna close. Robert Sutherland died in prison when Thomas was 16, and Diana felt nothing but relief at the news. She did not attend the funeral. That chapter of her life was closed, and she had no desire to revisit it. She had a family who loved her, a husband who cherished her, a home that was filled with warmth and laughter. That was all that mattered. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Thomas was courting a young woman from town, the daughter of the general store owner, and Rose had just turned 17 and was already breaking hearts. Dr. Harrison and his wife were there, older now but still sharp and kind. Reverend Thomas, who had married them, came with his own wife and children. The house was full of food and music and joy. As the sun set, Isaac pulled Deanna outside onto the porch, away from the noise and the crowd. They stood together, his arms around her waist, her head on his shoulder, watching the sky turn gold and pink and purple. 20 years, Deanna said softly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you found me in the snow, and sometimes it feels like we have been together forever. Both are true, Isaac said. Every day with you feels new, but you also feel like you have always been part of me. He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face. I love you, Deanna Campbell. I loved you when you were half frozen and bleeding in a snowdrift, and I love you even more now. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. And you are mine, Deanna said, her eyes shining with tears. My hero, my husband, my love, thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for giving me this beautiful life. They kissed as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, the same mountains where their story had begun. Inside the house, their children laughed, and their friends celebrated, and the life they had built together thrummed with happiness and love. Deanna thought about the girl she had been, abandoned and dying, certain her story was ending. She could never have imagined this future, this abundance of love and family and home. But Isaac had given her a second chance, had ridden through a blizzard to save her life, and in doing so had saved his own. The years rolled on, gentle and kind. Thomas married his sweetheart and brought her to live on the ranch, building a small house on the property so they could stay close. Rose eventually married a lawyer from Sacramento, a good man who treated her like the treasure she was. They had grandchildren, 4 in total, who ran through the ranch house the same way their parents had, filling it with noise and joy. Isaac's hair turned gray, then white, and lines deepened around his eyes, but Deanna thought he grew more handsome with each passing year. Her own dark hair silvered, and her hands became marked with the work of decades. But she had never felt more beautiful than when Isaac looked at her with love still burning bright in his eyes. On a summer evening, when they were both in their 60s, They rode out together to the meadow where Isaac had first proposed. They did this every year on their anniversary, a pilgrimage to the place where their love had been born. This year was their 40th anniversary, and the meadow was as beautiful as ever, the wildflowers swaying in the breeze. They spread a blanket and sat together, watching the sky, holding hands like they had through 4 decades of marriage. Deanna rested her head on Isaac's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. 40 years, she said. I can hardly believe it. Best 40 years of my life, Isaac said. I would live them all again, exactly the same, just to end up right here with you. Do you have any regrets? Deanna asked. Isaac was quiet for a moment, thinking. Only that I did not find you sooner, but I suppose we found each other at exactly the right time. I think so too. If I had met you before that night, I would have been someone different. I would not have known what you were offering me. I would not have understood how precious this love is. You are precious, Isaac said, turning to kiss her temple. You have been the light of my life, Deanna. Every single day with you has been a gift. They stayed in the meadow until the stars came out, wrapped in each other's arms, remembering and dreaming and being grateful. When they finally rode back to the ranch, the house was lit up, and their family was waiting for them, a surprise party planned by their children. The party went late into the night, filled with stories and laughter and love. Deanna stood at the edge of the room at one point, just watching. She saw Thomas dancing with his wife, their oldest son asleep on his father's shoulder. She saw Rose arguing good-naturedly with her husband about politics, their daughters playing cards in the corner. She saw Dr. Harrison, ancient now but still spry, telling stories to the grandchildren. And she saw Isaac, her Isaac, standing in the middle of it all, his face creased with joy. He caught her watching and smiled, that smile that still made her heart skip. He crossed the room to her and took her hand. "Dance with me," he said. "There is no music right now. We do not need music." So they danced in the corner of their living room, swaying gently, and the room full of people faded away until it was just the two of them, just like it had been in the beginning. Deanna closed her eyes and let herself remember that night in the blizzard, the moment Isaac had appeared through the snow like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to say. "I would do it all again," she whispered. "Every hard thing, every painful moment, just to end up here with you." "Me too," Isaac said, 1,000 times over. They grew old together, watching their family flourish, watching the ranch they had built together prosper and grow. Isaac taught his grandsons to ride and trap and hunt, while Deanna taught her granddaughters to read and cook and stand up for themselves. They were a team always, supporting each other through the aches and pains of aging, through the loss of friends, through the changes that time brought. When Isaac was 72, he fell ill with pneumonia. Deanna nursed him through it with the same fierce determination he had shown riding through the blizzard to save her. She sat by his bedside day and night, refused to let him go, and he fought his way back to health because he could not bear to leave her. "You are stubborn," he told her when he was finally well enough to sit up. "I learned from the best," she replied and kissed him. They lived to see their grandchildren marry and have children of their own. The ranch passed to Thomas, who ran it with the same love and care his parents had shown. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family threw a massive celebration, inviting the whole town. Angel's Camp had grown over the decades, but it still maintained its small-town charm, and the Campbells were beloved members of the community. At the celebration, Isaac stood up to give a toast. His hair was white, his face lined, but his voice was still strong. 50 years ago, he said, I was riding through a blizzard, thinking about nothing but getting home to my warm cabin, and then I found an angel in the snow." He looked at Deanna, and the love in his eyes was as bright as it had been the day they married. She was wounded and freezing, and I knew I had to save her. But what I did not know was that by saving her, she would save me. Deanna gave me a family, a home, a purpose. She gave me love beyond measure. These 50 years have been the greatest adventure of my life, and I would not trade a single moment. He raised his glass. To my wife, my love, my everything, may we have 50 more. The room erupted in cheers and applause, and Deanna stood and walked to him, tears streaming down her face. They kissed in front of everyone, and the crowd roared its approval. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren surrounded them, this family they had built, this legacy of love. Diana and Isaac did not get 50 more years, but they got several precious ones. They spent their final years in comfortable routine, taking care of each other, loving each other, grateful for every sunrise they witnessed together. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset over the valley, remembering and dreaming. "If I die first," Isaac said one evening, "I want you to know that you made my life complete. I was broken when I met you, and you made me whole." "Do not talk about dying," Deanna said. "We have years yet, maybe, but I want you to know just in case." He took her hand, his grip still strong. "And if you die first, I want you to wait for me. I will find you again, just like I found you in the blizzard." "I will wait," Deanna promised. "But let us not worry about that now. Let us just be together." "Always," Isaac said, "always together." They were together until the end, growing old gracefully, surrounded by love and family. When Isaac finally passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Diana held his hand and whispered that she would see him soon. She lived another 2 years, spending time with her family, making sure everything was in order, preparing for her own journey. On a quiet spring morning, Diana passed away in her sleep, a smile on her face. Her children found her in her bed, looking peaceful, one hand stretched out to the empty space beside her where Isaac had slept for over 50 years. They buried her next to Isaac on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the oak trees, with a view of the valley and the mountains beyond. The whole town came to the funeral, and the stories told that day were full of love and laughter and gratitude. Thomas gave the eulogy, his voice breaking as he talked about his parents' love, about how they had built something beautiful together, about how their legacy would live on through the family they had created. Years after Deanna's death, her great-granddaughter asked Thomas to tell her the story of how her great-grandparents met. Thomas smiled and pulled out an old photograph of Isaac and Deanna on their wedding day, looking young and hopeful and so in love. "It started with a blizzard," he said, and began to tell the story that had been told and retold through the generations. The story of the cowboy who rode through snow and cold to save a wounded woman, and how that act of courage and compassion had blossomed into a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. The ranch still stands today, run by their descendants, a testament to what Isaac and Deanna built together. And sometimes, on cold winter nights when the snow falls over the mountains, people swear they can see 2 figures riding through the storm, a cowboy and his lady, together forever, their love eternal as the mountains themselves.